Hello, we can go ahead and get started. So yeah, let's go ahead and take a look at what's coming up for the rest of the week. Um, so the game plan for today and the next few days is just to review everything that we covered all from the past 2 weeks. So we're actually going to go through a whole project from start to beginning, one level at a time, of a brand new project that we'll be starting on. And we'll be implementing all like the models, controllers, the front end, and also the different pages that we have as well. There are not going to be a lot of new content this week. The only new content is a little bit with pre-populating the database, and then that would be covered today. And then we'll be going over a little bit of styling on Wednesday. That's the only new content. The other stuff is mainly going to review everything that we learned thus far. And then that will really help hit a home run on some of the controllers and models. And then it will kind of clear things up with the React router since we only went over that a single day. So that's what we'll have there. And then we'll have a different project next week that we'll be having to work on with that. But yeah, that's the game plan for that. Any questions about what is coming up? Sweet. We're also going to do things a little bit differently, where we are going to kind of prep for our final project in a way where we are going to kind of look at some of the items that will be given, such as wireframes as well as other stuff, and kind of plan out how to build that ourselves. Because that's what you'll be doing towards the end of it. We're just kind of prepping that up to see how we can tackle that and how we can kind of look at those things. So far, we've been just like thinking of an idea and bringing that idea onto paper and planning things out that way. But this is kind of a little bit different thinking of how we'll be doing things. So what we are going to be doing is that we'll talk about what a wireframe is. And essentially, we are going to build out all of the wireframes. And then one day at a time, we'll be working on each individual level. So I'm planning to get this level done first of the lists, and then we'll go to the next level and then finish off with the next level. And then at the end, we'll go ahead and style everything like it should be working on. We're mainly going to be focusing on functionality, so making sure that things work before they look like what we see on the designs, or making it look pretty. Just because it just takes a really long time to kind of style things up. Most of it is just going to be functionality from there. So yeah, so that's what we'll be doing as well, is that we're going to base off of like some of the objectives as well as wireframes rather than just kind of visualizing it all in your head. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about the wireframes. Let me go ahead and share this to you all. Let me see, let me do copy link. Yeah, only people invited or anyone with link can view. There we go. So that way you can view this. So I'll go ahead and Slack this out. This is going to be the project we'll be working on today and going out throughout the whole week. And this is what a wireframe would look like very similarly. And there's actually different versions of wireframes. This one is going to be considered grayscale, meaning that the layout and the items are already here, but the final styles isn't going to be looking like what we have here. So that's kind of what the different versions of wireframes are. And essentially what a wireframe or a grayscale is that it will kind of help you visualize what the client wants for their pages and their functionality. So like, for example, they want this page or this page, they want this button, this form, and they want it to do this and that. And this is a better way to visualize it than having you kind of talk it out with other people. So we're going to start off with this version of wireframes of grayscales first, meaning that this will really lay out like the individual items that we need and the functionality that we need is these items that we have here. So that's what we will go ahead and start on. This is just to look ahead and inside of your other projects of what we'll be doing. But essentially, we'll be slowly going more and more, going to go more and more in depth of how we are going to be styling stuff. And essentially, we'll go through different versions of our application. So for example, this one is an application of what we'll be working on later on. And it first starts off as grayscales. So it kind of lays out like the different sections, pages, and functionality. And then inside of there, we will go ahead and go into what the wireframes will look like, of what the actual styles, as well as the fonts and the pictures and colors. And that's the next stage, is to kind of style it up a little bit more. And then the last thing that we'll talk about a little bit later on is how it will look like on different screens. So this is what this application will look on a mobile screen, for example. So that's kind of the different levels of what we will be working with. Is that we'll be working with different wireframes, and then later on we'll progressively go to more and more details of what the final product will look like. The ones that you see here, they're just the first step of many just to get to the end result. And that's what we are going to be working with. Now going forward, when we are going to send out assignments or have you work on a project, we may give you something like this, either a grayscale or wireframe. And then based off of that, we will be building our pages and project based off of what is given here. Same thing with your final projects as well. You'll be given like a grayscale like this, and then you'll kind of extract different functionalities from there. And we'll kind of go through how to do that here. So what we are going to be doing today and the rest of the week is just one application, and that will be our to-do list. This is kind of like a check-off list of how we are going to be keeping track of what we have done and what we haven't done and all that. So there's going to be some navigation of what we'll be having. And then we'll have a home page. This is what the home page will look like. You can notice here that this isn't the final text, it's just some dummy text. So we can just put dummy text for now. So that we can mainly focus on the content and the functionality. We don't really need to focus on what it will actually say or anything like that. And then this one is going to be another page, which is going to be about, and this will talk a little bit more about the app. And it looks like it has like a meet a team section here. And then over here, this is where the main functionality will come into play when you go to the list page. So when you go to the list page, there will be a form to create a different list. And with the list, it will all display out here with the list. It looks like a list here has a name and a description. So that is the two fields that we'll be working with. And then we'll have all CRUD actions, it looks like. So it'll be create, you can view all of them, you can view a single one. Then you can go ahead and edit or cancel. So if you do edit, it'll pop up with the title and the description of the list, and then you're able to delete the list as well. And then we'll go into another page by clicking the to-dos. For each of the to-dos, each of the lists, it will have their own to-dos. So let's say this is a grocery list. This is my homework list I need to get done. This is like my gardening list that we have. So then inside of the to-dos for like homework, for example, this will be all of the to-dos that we need to have there. So to-dos only have a title and complete. And I might add in another field just so that we can just deal with different variation of data types. So this one is going to be a Boolean. We're already working with description and list. So that would be type string or text. So I'm going to work with a Boolean. I might throw in another one in here just for learnability sake of a integer. So we can kind of do like a how hard is it, or is this, or difficulty of this to-do item. And then I'll go ahead and add that as well. And then this looks like all full CRUD actions as well. You can create, update, delete them. If you do an update, it'll pull up the form, all that there. And then you can go one more level of the notes. Like let's say that this is homework assignment 1 of the contact list. These are the notes for that. And it looks like this one is also full CRUD action as well. So that's what we'll be building out. It's just going to be a few static pages. The main functionality is all the CRUD actions for each level here. And then we'll talk about more about how we can break this up into small manageable parts, because right now it just looks like a whole application, but we're actually going to break it up into small components. So for example, for the home page, instead of building out the home page, we might break this up into like a header, into like a feature section, and then a price section. So that way we don't have everything on one page, essentially. We're just bringing it up into some small manageable parts. Same thing with this too. So we'll talk about that as well. Any questions about the idea of the to-do list of what we'll be building? So in the end result, it will behave and look very similar to what we have here. So that's kind of the goal of what we have here. So first things first is that let's go ahead and build our initial application. And this one we know needs both React and Rails just because we need to store items within our database. So that's why we need to have this functionality of React on Rails there. So let's go ahead and do that. And then once we go ahead and start building out the models, we can kind of see what that model has. So we can go ahead and open this up if you really wanted to follow along. But first things first, let's go ahead and go into the directory of our project directory. So inside of here, I'm currently inside of my root directory. I need to go to my DPL folder. So let's go into my DPL folder, and that would be going into my desktop here. And then going into my DPL folder. Yours might be a little bit different depending on where you are inside of your initial directory there. So here, to create a new project, we are going to call it to-do list. It'll be with Rails s-p, or sorry, oh, that's how you start a server. It'll be Rails new, and then the name of the application. I'm going to call it, because I already have something called to-do list. I'm going to call it React on Rails to-do list. And then I'll also label it summer 22 because I do have multiple. And then we need to specify the database of PostgreSQL and then -- API because we want our backend to act like a API. So let's go ahead and create our initial application on the Rails end. And that's what we would do. So then what we would need to do is that we need to go into our app directory, and then we need to go ahead and run some commands inside of our app directory. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and do a cd into my React on Rails project. And then what we are going to do now is going to go into the, let's see, let's go into the gem file first. So let's go ahead and open this up here. And I actually want to go over something before we work on this. I did show you the wrong configuration for collapsible folders. So let's actually go through that as a group again, and I'll show you the right one. The other one does do something else. The one that we are going to be doing will be slightly different. So then what we are going to go to is going to be code, preferences, and settings should pop up. So let me make sure it does. So code, preferences, and then settings. And then the setting, you have to search it up because it will take a while for us to search it up manually. So we are going to type in Explorer. And then what we are going to do is that there is a compact folders. That's the one that we don't want to be checked off. So again, it will be code, and then it would be preferences. So this one right here. And then after that, it'll be settings, and then type in the word Explorer, and then compact folders should be unchecked. Because if you have it checked, that's where it will compact them all into one directory, or else it would not. It would all show it in one line there. Go ahead, Brian.
On Saturday, we had a question around this. If you built your project and you had that checked the whole time, does it change anything as you're building things, or if you uncheck it, does it fix it as it goes along? Does that make sense? I'm saying?
Yeah, so with this, it really doesn't do anything within your code itself. It's just that later on when we go inside of the React side, it's a little bit hard to see which folder is within what other folder. So that kind of helps out with that particular one. But whether or not you have this check or not, that wouldn't contribute to your project at all.
Okay, so it wouldn't like make the folder structure different in any way. So it'd make it harder to call them different folders or files within the
Yeah.
structure. Okay,
Yeah. So
thanks.
yeah, this will help kind of visualize folders a lot better. So it would be it will display them like this instead of if you have two folders side by side. That's what this compact folder is. So let me go ahead and select this out. Okay. So yeah, so that will help out with the settings. But yeah, everything else should be good there. Let's go into our gem file. And then within the gem file, we need to go ahead and we'll go ahead and add in two additional gems. One of them is our debugger gem. The other one is going to be what we will be talking about for pre-populating our database. Because right now, we don't have all of our data inside of our database until we create it on the front end. So it'll be a little bit better for us to kind of pre-populate that already and then have it know that it will create in that case there. The other way was to do it manually inside of the console, but that one is a little bit slower. And that one isn't a reliable way to create things just because it will only create it on your computer. You would need to do it on every single other person's computer, especially if you're working on a group. So what we will be using for our debugger is going to be Pride. What we'll be using for our generating fake data is something called Faker. So we'll be needing both of those for this project we'll be working on. So here is your gem file.
And what is the faker for?
That is for generating fake data.
Fake data. Oh.
We'll talk about that once we create our first model. So anytime that we update our gem file, we would need to run a bundle command. So let's go ahead and run that. And then if any of these items need some configuration or any other types of settings you would need to change, then you would need to do them. But for both of these, you don't need to do any of that there. So the other thing that we'll be doing is to do our other housekeeping items, which is to create our initial database. That one will be bundle exec rails db create. If you forget this step and you try to migrate later on, or if you try to do anything with your Rails controller, then it will give you a no database error. So that's why we just need to get this out of the way at the very beginning so you have a database. But if you don't have this and you're getting a no database error, that means that you forgot this step. This will go ahead and create two databases for us to use. We'll be using the development one to be working with. The other thing that we would probably going to need a little bit later on is this step right here to go ahead and add our static controller. This one is for production. So later on when we publish our website, this will go ahead and make sure that we are going to be pointing in the right direction. So we'll just generate that at the very beginning as well. So later on, we don't need to worry about that. Okay, the last housekeeping item to do is to, well, two last items. One of them is to go ahead and utilize your Git flow and then push this up to GitHub. And then we need to plan out our database. So let's go ahead and do that. That would be doing a git add because it already did a git init for us. So we can just go ahead and add it. And then we'll do a git commit -m, what we just did. I just did create project. I didn't really do much. So that is the commit message there. That just labels what we just did. And then we need to go into GitHub and create a new repository with the exact same name. So I called it React on Rails, to-do list, summer 22. So that name and this name should be the same. Or else it'll be a little bit confusing later on when you're trying to look for the project on GitHub where it doesn't match up with what you have on your local machine. So that will go ahead and it will label things. We can keep everything else normal. Let's go ahead and create that repository. One more thing we need to double check is make sure that this is SSH. So make sure that this is highlighted and it should start and end with a Git. So make sure that this starts and ends with a Git and it is inside of SSH. If yours doesn't, if it starts with HTTPS, this is the wrong one. If you go ahead and add this, this will ask for your username and password every single time you do a get command when you push up and pull down and stuff. And it'll still work. It's just a lot more extra steps you would need to do. So make sure that we do the SSH because we configure GitHub with our SSH. So that is the one that we want. So with the SSH, I need to go ahead and do a get remote add origin. That's what we'll be calling the SSH. And then make sure that you paste your own SSH from your GitHub. And that will bridge the connection from your local machine to the one inside of GitHub. And then the final machine is going to be get push origin main. And that will go ahead and push what we have on our local machine that has been added and committed into GitHub. Okay, so that should be good there. Next step is to go ahead and plan out our database. Let me double check here if that created. Awesome. All the commands that I just did, that is inside of Slack. So you can take a look at that if you are missing some. So yeah, let's go ahead and plan out the database based off of what we have here. So with our to-do list, we have like a nav bar and a home page. The home page doesn't have anything that we are saving technically in our database. Like all these are just static items that we have. So we don't need anything in the home page that we are storing. So that could just be nothing to do with the backend. That is mostly a front end thing. Same thing with the about as well. There's nothing that we are doing any sort of CRUD actions or storing anything within the about page from the back end to front end. So we're actually not going to worry about this in the back end as well. This one is more of a front end stuff. So homepage and about page, that's more front end stuff. So we don't need to worry about models or controllers or anything. We can just focus on that on the front end. List, however, is going to need some of the CRUD actions here, and then it looks like we are storing it in within the database. So list is going to be a model that we are going to be working on. Let's just focus mainly on lists. We'll do one layer at a time. Don't even worry about the other ones because you can't really go to the other ones unless this level is done anyway. So make sure you have one level done before you move on to the next. So I'm going to take a look a little bit more in depth within the form of what list has. So it looks like the model name would be called list, singular list. And it looks like it has a title or a description of what it has here. So that's what it is displaying here. So it displays the list title and then a description. And that's all the fields that it has. So let's kind of take that over into our Lucid chart to kind of look and plan that out. Okay. Oh, well, yeah, I don't know if that's the right one that we have there. So let's go ahead and just build a new one, actually. This one will be called list here that we have. And then within the list, I'm just gonna call it title and description. That's what we'll be calling it there. So this will be title. It looks like title is a string. So we'll just keep it like that. And then the description would be a little bit bigger. That will be type text. And I actually don't need a third field. It'll just be those two fields there. So that's what I am going to have with the first model, and the first table is my list here. So yeah, let's go ahead and build that out. And then that should get us started. So the first level is going to be list. So you can follow the sheets here of how to generate a individual model here. So it's with the G command. So to generate a model, I'm going to use bundle exec rails G model, and then the name of the model, which is list singular, because models are singular, controllers are plural. And then it will be the title, which is type string, so I can leave it as is. And then the description of what the list is going to be type text. And then if it has a parent, I need to display who the parent is. But this one is the first level. It doesn't have a parent. So we only need to stop here. But if it does have a parent-child relationship, I need to specify who the parent is. So this is good for now. So that will go ahead and generate two things. The first thing that it will generate for us is a migration file, and these are sets of instructions to apply to the database. So that's what we have here is the set of instructions. So this will create a table, and then it will have a title and a description there. So that looks good. If it doesn't look good, what you would need to do is to do a D command to delete and then regenerate it back. Like for example, one example that students might make is that they would sometimes name it S instead of singular, or they would do a space between the data types. If any of those things happen, you can always do a D to delete it and then regenerate it the correct way. That goes the same with models and controllers and migrations. So you can do that technique with all of them. So since that looks good, let's go ahead and do a bundle exec rails db migrate. Because anytime that we have a migration file that we want to run, we need to run it with the migrate command. And that will go ahead and have that within the schema. The second thing that one command also creates for us is the models. And the models is going to be inside of your app models, and then it will be in here. And the one that we're working with is our list model. This is where you'll be putting your logic as well as your validations and associations and all that here. I don't have any associations quite yet, but let's do some validations. So we'll just do validates the title and the description like so, and then presence true. So that means that they would need to type in something for the title and the description in order for you to do anything within the database, whether you're updating or creating. So that's what we'll have is this validates present sub. So here is the model. And that's all we need to do for now. We can always add in more validations if you need to be more thorough. And then later on, when we have more models, there might be a relationship with that. So we'll be adding associations more later on. So that's all you need to do with models for now. Sweet. So let me go ahead and close these now, because the next step that we'll be going into is the controller. If you need to make any sort of change, we'll go ahead and do that with a migration if you already migrated. So we'll practice that tomorrow, because tomorrow's table that we'll be having, it will have a lot more data types, and we can go ahead and go through what happens if I want to add an additional field after we did everything. So that looks good. Let's go ahead and generate our controller, and then we'll work on the controllers and routes next. So follow this pattern here. So then it'll be bundle exec rails G controller. And then the controller is API / and then the name of the model, but it'll be lowercase and then plural. So make sure it's lowercase here and plural so it knows which it is you're talking about. Don't do uppercase. It doesn't know what uppercase is really picky on that. Make sure it's lowercase, and also make sure it's plural because models are singular, controllers are plural. I'm also going to do a skip routes. And something else that I am going to be doing is that I'm also going to generate all of the methods that I need to create my CRUD actions. So I'll be doing the index, show, create, update, and destroy. So that way it will generate that for me as well. If you don't have that, then you have to write out the methods yourself with like a def and end. If you do it this way, it'll make it for you. So it's really up to you of what you want to do. So then what we are going to be working on next is that we are going to be working on the routes, and then we'll go into the controller. So the API routes that we are going to go and work on is going to be in your config routes here. So config folder and then routes. And then here, I'm actually going to delete all of this, and here, it'll still be inside of the do end because this is where Rails creates their own routes. And then what we are going to have here is the namespace and then colon API do and then end. So that will go ahead and point them into the controllers API folder here. So that's what we have first. Go ahead, Brian.
I made a typo in that last part, and I did so I did skip routes, and I forgot one of the dashes in front.
Yeah.
Or both dashes in front. What's the best way to redo all that?
You would go ahead and do a D for delete. So it will be the last command. You'll do a delete, and then you would regenerate it and then add in the other one that you were missing here.
Okay, and it didn't create anything. It didn't create routes at the same.
It will create routes, but after you do the D, it will go ahead and delete those.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep. So that would be our namespace API. It will point into your API folder. The next thing that we want to do is that we need to have it go into this controller here of lists of all of our CRUD actions. So if we want all of our CRUD actions, that would be with the keyword resources, like so. And then it would be your controller name, which is going to be list plural. And that's all that we are going to be doing for now. Don't plan out ahead quite yet because we aren't getting to those other levels quite yet. I only did it last week just because we are covering certain aspects of Rails. So we covered controllers, we covered models within a day, we covered routes all within a day. But this is what you would need to do initially, is to just go one level at a time. So here is your routes inside of your config. And again, these are your API routes. Later on, we'll have a different routes. That's for navigation. That's more for your back end, or that's more for your front end. This one is more for your back end. So this one will lead somewhere into your controller. The notes for the routes is actually up here. So you can kind of take a look at that pattern if you do want to reference that. You can also do only an accept and then only go 2 levels deep from there. Okay, so that should be good for now. Next thing that we are going to go into is our controller. And this one, we are going to start to fill it out following the pattern that we have here. And then it will go ahead and change depending on what we are doing. So because this is a parent, let me go ahead and make this more side by side here. We only need to go ahead and do the parent type of pattern here. So what is the model name in this particular case? Any guesses?
List.
Yep, it'll be list singular. So that is what we'll be putting on all of our model names. And again, with the pattern, especially in the controller, since it's way picky, we need to go ahead and focus on where we are capitalizing and where we are doing pluralization and all that. So let's go ahead and follow that pattern all the way within our controller. So then for our index where we are showing all of the items, it'll be the model name capitalized. So it'll be list.all. So notice how this and this, they're both capitalized. Next up is the show. So this one will be at the model name, which is list. That one is lowercase. So this one is also lowercase, but this one is capitalized. Find params and then ID. Zoom out a bit there. And then we'll go ahead and render JSON at list. So that's what we'll have there. So this variable is referencing this variable here. So those two should match at least. And then I am going to do the create. It is going to be at list equals capital L list dot new with the list params. Go ahead and define that afterwards. And then if at list dot saves, then we'll go ahead and render JSON our list. Else, make sure you end it too. So make sure your if else ends and then your home create also ends. We are going to do a render JSON, and then this would be errors. And then it will be at list because it follows at model name.errors. And then this one would be status, not state status. I'll just copy all this actually. There we go. Status of unprocessable entity. That will give us an error. Yeah. So let's go ahead and create what list params is. So we'll go ahead and scroll down here, and this will define what list params is here. So then over in the private, we are then going to do a def, and then this would be your list params, because it's the model name params. That's what we have here. That's referencing this and this. So those two names should match. And then it will be params.require the model name, which is going to be list, and then .permit the fields that we are going to have for the list. That one, we said it was title and description. So this makes sure that it is in the right format. So it makes sure that the item that's coming in from the controller, it should be labeled list as the key, and then the value would be another hash of the title to be whatever as a string, and then the description would be also a string as well because it is type text. So the list params make sure that we are passing in the right fields, as well as when we do a save, it also checks the validations, and it also makes sure that they're also in the right data types as well. So this is more for making sure the data goes cleanly at this level. So then let's go ahead and go into our update. So with our update, it'll be at list equals list dot find params ID. So that will go ahead and find it. And then if at model, or the model name is list dot updates with the list params again, then I need to do my if else, and then let's end it before I forget. I need to go ahead and render JSON my list that I updated. So this, and this, they should all match. And then here it'll be render JSON errors, and then it'll be at list.errors. And then I need to bring this over as well. And that will handle the update. Last thing that we need is going to be our destroy method. So this one will be at list equals capital list dot find params ID. And then we are going to go ahead and do @list.destroy. And then we are going to do a render JSON a message. And then I'll just say that it will just be list deleted or no longer with us or something like that. So that's what we'll have there. And that's how we'll fill out the controllers for the first level. Something else is that we are repeating this line of code a lot inside of the destroy, update, and the show. So to clean that up, what I am going to do is to have a before action of set, I'll call it set list. And then I only want this to run on your show where it's repeating. So this repeats on the show method. It also repeats on the update method and the destroy method. So let's do that. So it'll be show, update, and destroy. So then with this set list function that I am going to be having, I'll go ahead and define that here on the bottom of set list. And I'm basically going to copy my repeated code inside of here. So that's the repeated code line, is that I'm repeating that here on update, show, and destroy. And that's what I'm having as our set list. So now I can actually remove this line of code here, as well as here, and then here. So after the pattern, you can go ahead and clean up your code a bit by putting a before action. So before your show, update, and destroy, it'll go ahead and run this line of code. So that way our controller is slightly smaller and it will be a little bit more efficient for us to work with. Okay, so now let me just do model name. We have our controller already filled out. We don't know if there are any errors or if it's working quite yet. We would test it out later on when we are doing our front end, which is going to be our next step. But before that, I actually want to go into a little bit newer content to pre-populate our data inside of our database. So that way we'll have a little bit of items to work with on the front end. Instead of having us wait until we have our create functionality working, and then we can go through all of the other functionality. So this will kind of help out with that. So we don't have to go and only do create first. We can move on to our other code actions. So let me go ahead and slack out the controller. Again, we just follow the pattern and then we clean up the pattern with the before action. So the pattern can be found here. And the snippet of the before action would be right here. And then later on, we'll talk about what it will look like if it was the parent-child controller. So here is your list controller. Sweet. And then we already did the routes, so that should be all good to go. What we are going to be doing is now, let me go ahead and collapse everything so we can take a look at this. So to pre-populate our database, we could do it two ways. One way is to do it manually inside of our Rails console, but that way will take forever and it will only apply to your own computer. If you are working within a group or within a team, whatever you did in here, that's only within your computer. So that's not the ideal. It will still work, but it's not the ideal way of doing your pre-populated data. What we are going to do instead is that make sure that you have everything collapsed, because where we'll be going to is the DB folder. And we're actually going to another file called the seeds file. And this is the direct documentation of what Rails called this seeds file. But essentially what it is that it will allow you to run your Ruby code and your active record code inside of the seeds file. And we can go ahead and pre-populate the database with anything that we have here. So for example, they do have an example here. So essentially they created a bunch of array of objects. So they created some movies here. And then with the movie, they went and created a character for each of the movies. So we can go ahead and have our database be filled up with multiple types of data that we have here. So let me show you how to do that. So we can go ahead and build it out one at a time, or we can have a little bit of fun with it and have it be generated with our faker data. So let me just show you how it will be like one at a time, and you can kind of see how less ideal this would be, because this would work if you're dealing with a little bit of data, but usually you want a lot of data. You don't want just like one or two, you want like 10 or 50 or 100 or like a couple hundred, right? So that's what we are going to be working with. So for us to go ahead and create a list, it will go ahead and be like this. So with the create, and then we need to pass in the key and values of each of the items. So this would be like a grocery list, for example. And then that would be description of our, I'll just say food for the week. And then that's all you need to do to create a list. So I'm going to create 3 more. I just basically copy and pasted. You can also do a command option, or wait, control option. Give me one sec. It is, yeah, option shift down, and that will go ahead and grab the highlighted line, and it will go ahead and copy and paste it down one line. So option shift down is what I also use as well. And then let's just change this up a bit. This one will be office. This one would be office supplies needed. And this one would also be another list of like bunker. This one would be meal prep. Sure. So that could be your individual data that you have within your database here. So again, this would work if you were to do only a few, but imagine me creating 50 of these, right? It's got to be all night, especially if you're doing 50 or 100 or a few hundred. So this way works, but we'll be using other tactics to make it work a little bit better. So what we are going to be doing here is that we are going to kind of do a different loop. The loop that we are going to be doing is that how many times that we are creating the items. So it'll be 10 times do. So that's how many times that we are looping through this, and doing this particular line of code is 10 times. And you can change this number to however many data that you want. So it could be 10, it could be 100, 150. Just be careful. The bigger the number is, the longer it takes to create, because you're just looping through the same line of code like that. So you can always start off with the lower number, and then you can go up from there. You don't have to go pretty high at the beginning. So with this, I'm going to run whatever I put within this end, do and end 10 times. That's essentially what this is saying. So what I am going to do is that I am still going to be creating a list, but the title that I have, as well as the description that I will have, won't be something that I will be coming up with. It would be something that I am going to have one of my gems going to be coming up with. And that's where we are going to talk about our gem here of Faker. So let me show you what Faker is and how we'll be using it. And this will help us generate our fake data within our database. So make sure when you are searching this up, search Faker gem. If you just search Faker, it will give you some League of Legends stuff. So this is the documentation that we'll be referencing. It's this Faker one from GitHub. So what Faker is that it is a gem that has a bunch of fake data for you to use, and it has different generators that you can have here. So they have a lot of different categories. So for example, they have like appliances, businesses, Chuck Norris quotes, coffee, desserts. They also have different sections and restaurants and blockchain and books and creatures, games and other stuff, movies as well. So you can have a little bit of fun with your data that you would be having there. So we can definitely use some of this to our fake data. And you don't really have to be super like fine-tuned of what it is. Like you can have it pretty close. Like for example, if you need a phone number, they have a phone number for you. All you need to do is to have it be what type it is, like cell phone or house phone. And then if you need like a name, this would be like different names that you have here. So those are fake names and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose a random one for the title. And for the description, I'm probably going to use lorem, which is the fake data that we'll have for our individual descriptions. So that will just give us like individual Latin phrases or sentences or paragraphs like so. So we'll be using lorem. What category should we use for the title of these lists? Anything stand out? Let me go from start to beginning.
Hipster.
Sure, let's do hipster. Let's do hipster. And you're more than welcome to choose a different one if you want to. You don't have to do what we have here. So it looks like we have hipster words, sentences, and paragraphs. So let's go ahead and have the hipster word be the title. How is irony a hipster word? Sure. So let's go ahead and have that be the title. And based off the documentation, you just need to go ahead and have this line of code, and that will go ahead and give you a random hipster word for the title. I guess, let me see. I guess we can go ahead and instead of using lorem, looks like this one has like a sentence and a paragraph. We can go ahead and use those instead. So let's go ahead and use a hipster sentence. I'll just use a regular sentence. I don't really need to worry about the word count or how many random words or anything like that. So let's just do a random sentence for the description. And again, you can use your own. You don't have to use the one that we have here. Make sure that when you are having it, you have the comma, because it will go ahead and do a start and an end for that particular key value pair. So this one would be title, and then the next one would be description. It's kind of like when you are listing things out inside of English, the last one would need the comma here, but not the very last one. This one will give you an error. So that is our individual seeds file, and that's all you need to do to create the seeds file. To go ahead and run it, we would need to run this command here of bundle exec rails db seed. And this will go ahead and go into this file and run the code. And if you run this, it will go ahead and run the code again. So whatever you have in here, it will go ahead and run the code inside of our database here. So later on, what we'll be doing, just so that we don't have a lot of data, is that when we go ahead and run the seeds, we need to go ahead and delete any list that was already there. So this will delete any list that was already there. Go ahead, Brian.
When you are running Faker to create data like this, and if you have like a unique constraint, do you run into any problems with it?
Yes.
Creating data that's already the same?
Yeah, this will bounce you back because it might hit one of the constraints, especially for uniqueness. You might have to do something to make it more unique. So what you would do, like, let's say that you have a uniqueness. Let's actually do that as one of our validations. That's a really good point. Because right now, if we were to run it, I might have a few lists that has the same name. So it might be grocery list and another one that could be grocery list. Let's say that that's not the case. We would go ahead and validate uniqueness of just a title. So we validates title, and then it would be uniqueness true. Yeah. So if this is the case, then this wouldn't work. Then there might be some that would be created, others they won't be created. So if that's the case, then we need to go ahead and fix this so it'll be a little bit more unique. So let's go ahead and let me re-slack out the model. We added another validation here of uniqueness. So that means that we can't have two titles of the list be the exact same. So if that's the case, then we need to go ahead and have this be sure that it is unique. One way that I like to do that is to go ahead and put a counter. With the counter, I will go ahead and just start the counter out here to be equal to 0. And what I am going to do is that I'm actually going to string interpolate this item here within my string interpolation, but this is the Ruby one, so it needs the octathorpe. And then I'm also going to interpolate the number here at the end. So then it will go ahead and be your counter like so. So then I am also going to do our counter. I'm going to have it be a better scope. So it'll be instant scope counter, going to do plus equals 1. So that will go ahead and increment the counter for every single time that I am generating this particular one that I have here. So this will guarantee uniqueness. So then if I do get like groceries, it'll be grocery 0, but then if I get grocery again, it'll be grocery 1. So that will go ahead and guarantee that my generated data will have a uniqueness, because I'm adding in something else that would be unique, which is a counter here. That's a really good example there. And then also if you have other validations, like let's say length of, or if this needs to be a little bit longer, there's also certain settings for some of these that will allow you to add in either more or less characters. Like for example, this one will go ahead and allow you 3 more words, or you can do multiple sentences, or however many characters. So some of these may have some of that attached to those. So you would go ahead and add in those optional fields. So yeah, that is a really good point. Make sure that this also works with your validations as well, or else if it doesn't work, it will only create a few of them rather than the full 10 amount here. Okay, so yeah, so that would work. What we are going to be doing is that we are going to do this delete list that was already there. So just in case if there are any lists inside of our database, I want to delete that and regenerate that with our data that we have here. So be careful with this. That might be good for testing. But if you were to go ahead and already have this working, you might accidentally delete someone else's information that they want to keep around. So this is a optional one. But it's mainly for testing. So mainly for testing. So when I want to test, I want to be sure that there aren't any lists inside of my database. So I'm actually going to do a delete all here. And that will go ahead and delete all of my individual lists and all of the stuff that belongs to a list. And there's no going back after that. So that will delete all of them. This will create it 10 times, and this will go ahead and ensure the validation. So helps makes it unique. There we go. And this will create it 10 times. Create it 10 times. And then to go ahead and run this, this will go ahead and be ran with this particular database command. You can find this command inside of the sheets as well. That one is just up here of your database commands. That's just one of them. That's the seed one that you have here. So this is the preferred way if you were to create some fake data, because now not only do you have this, then other people inside of your team would also have it as well. So when they go ahead and grab your code down, the only thing that they would need to do is that to apply that to their own database. So the only thing that once that you have this, you would go ahead and run the code of DB seeds into your database as well. So here is your seeds file there that I just slacked out. And then let's go ahead and run this Rails DB seed. If you want to display like a message, you can to tell you what it is that you created and stuff like that. That's totally up to you because it still runs like Ruby command and everything like that. So yeah, you can make it a lot more readable because right now, if I go ahead and run this command of seed, it will go ahead and run it. And then it will go ahead and looks like I have an error here. So this error is saying that undefined local variable counter inside of my string interpolation. So yeah, it looks like it's this counter here. I do have an @ symbol, so we need to use the right scope. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. So this one is the more correct one. So that one should work now. Let me go ahead and rerun that command to seed it. And if it kicks you off to the next line, then it should work. You can also go ahead and check in your Rails C, and then you can do list.all, and that will just show you all of them as well. But it's a little bit hard to read it inside of here. So we're actually going to take a look at it in the front end. And that's what we'll be doing after the break, is to take a look at all of them inside of the front end. So again, with the seeds file, it will go ahead and help you pre-populate your database with whatever you put within the seeds file. And we're also having Faker, which is a gem, and it has a bunch of other fake data that we have to our disposal to go ahead and generate certain items within our object. So this one, when we are creating a list, we are using a hipster word. And then to make it more unique, because we do have a unique validation here, we are adding a counter. So that way it would be a number next to it. So it'll be more unique. And then the description would be a hipster sentence. So it'll be a slightly longer element that we have there. And we're doing it 10 times. And then before we do that, we need to delete all the lists that we have inside of our database. So yeah, so this is a command that you would need to do if you were to be inside of a group. So if you did this inside of a group, other people on your team should also do this inside of your group as well. If I were to run this again, this will go ahead and rerun this command again. So if I go ahead and run this one more time, you don't have to, I'm just showing you, for example, this will go ahead and delete all of it and then recreate it with the fake data that we have. So be careful with this command. If you don't have this, this will create 10 more. But if you do have this, it will delete them and then it will generate 10. So that is the C's file. That's not required, but it's really good to have later on when we are working through our CRUD actions, is to have some data that is already created. Okay, any questions about the seeds file or generating fake data? Again, it could be whatever you want. Just have it as close as possible to meet the validations and close as possible as the data types. Okie dokie. Sweet. Let me go ahead and close everything out. What we are going to be doing is let's push up what we have onto GitHub. And then let's go ahead and get started to create the front end. And then when we come back from break, we'll go ahead and go more into the front end. And the front end is a little bit more tougher just because there's a lot more to it. And the pattern might change depending on how your wireframes are. So we'll take a look at that as well. So let's go ahead and go and push this up into GitHub. We'll do a get add. We'll also do a get commit -m. And then this would be, let's see, it will be list backend done. That is a good label. So that is my commit message. And then the last thing that I would need is doing a get push origin main. Get push origin main, and that should be good. So before we go into break, let's go ahead and create our front end because that might take a sec to generate. So to do that, we are going to be doing this right here of our NPX. I don't think yarn works anymore. We're actually going to be using NPX here. I'll double check. If it works, then I'll leave it on the sheets. If it doesn't work, I'll remove it from the sheets. But yeah, we'll be using NPX. So it will be NPX. And then what we are going to be doing is that we are doing a create react app and going to call it client because this has to do with everything on the front end. And usually the front end is called client. So that's what we'll have here. So go ahead and run that command. Once you go ahead and do that, let's go ahead and take a quick break. We'll come back at 7:20 Mountain Time. Hello, let's go ahead and get back into it. So before break, we went and finished the first level in the back end of lists. We also talked about how to generate some fake data for our database, and we did that with the seeds file. And then we initially created our React application. So that should be all good up till this point here. And then we need to go ahead and do a little bit of stuff on the front end side for it to work. So what I'm going to do is that I need to split my panels. You can do Command T or Command Shift D as in dog. And both of them should be CD into the same directory. So if you want to do the same thing that what I have on the screen, it'll be Command and then Shift and then D as in dog. So make sure that both of them are in the same directory. If they are not, make sure you CD until they are in the right directory, because we do have them in the same directory. I am going to do the top one here to be my client folder. So it'll be CD into my client. So one of them is going to be in your client here. After you navigate to the right folder for both of them. So then what we would need to do to get us started is to go ahead and add in the packages. And to that, add in the packages inside of your front end, it would be the yarn add command. And we can add multiple like Axios. And then the other one that we'll be using is for our navigational routes, which is going to be React Router DOM, which is our different pages that we have. So we'll go ahead and review that today as well. So Axios for our API requests, so we can perform CRUD actions for both the front end and the back end. And then React Router DOM is for our navigational routes. So that will allow us to have different pages. Just know that anything with the yarn command, that will be inside of your client folder. So if you try to run that here, it won't work the same way, or it won't reach the front end because it's not in the right folder. So make sure that anything with the yarn command, it will be with the client. Anything with the bundle command or Rails command or the get command, that will be inside of here, inside of your main directory. So that will take a while for it to go ahead and install. What we are going to do next is that we need to go through if there are any configurations for any of the gems or the packages in the front end. There is one that we need to do, and that would be with React Router. So after that is done, just let that go ahead and run. We are going to be inside of your client source folder and an index.js. So client source folder and an index.js. What we need to do to get our React Router up and running is that we need to go ahead and import browser router within the curly braces, because it is an export default. That is just a regular export. And this one is from React Router DOM. So this will help set up our navigational routes here. And then what we need to do is that we need to go ahead and call a opening and closing tag of browser router and have it wrap our app.js. What this will essentially say is that our app.js is in charge of all of our routes, our navigational routes. So that will go ahead and define all the pages and the paths to get to those pages there. So that's this one here. We'll come back to that. But here is our index.js. And that's all the configurations that you would need to do. It's inside of, for React Router, you just need to have your browser router wrap your app.js. The other thing that we need to do for our housekeeping items is to connect a proxy. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. That will be right above the script tag. So then to do the proxy, it would be inside of your package.json in your client folder. That would just say proxy like so. And then it would be http:/localhost 3001, because we'll be running our server in 3001. So when we are running our Rails server, whatever we put the port to, that would be this number. So you put it somewhere else, then you should also change that to be whatever number that is. So here is your package JSON. This is to have the connection established for when we are making our API calls from front end to back end. So this is our proxy here. And again, it should be around the script tag. Okay. And then the last part is to plan out the front end if there isn't any sort of plan. And that will kind of help you out of how to navigate between the pages and all of those that we have here and the navigation and everything. So we already have that within our Figma, which is the tool to help us view our wireframes. So we can kind of take a look at some of these to kind of see what components and pages that we have for our navigation. So it looks like we have multiple pages. It looks like 5 pages in total. The first one is going to be our home page. Second one will be our about page. And then we have our list page and then a no match page, which is what happens when we don't land on a particular page that doesn't match the URL. We won't worry about to do or note page quite yet. Let's just mainly focus on these 3 first, because these 3 are static. They should be relatively quick. This one will be spending some time to knock out the CRUD actions. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's generate our static pages first of the home and the about, and then the no match. So that will also handle those cases of where it doesn't match any of the routes. So let's do the home page first. Again, it doesn't have to look like this. We're just going to place the content of the home page into there, and then we can style and come back to it a little bit later. So we'll come back to that. Let's just mainly put in those different types here. So let's go into our app.js. I'm actually going to delete all of this here. And we are going to go ahead and import a few things. The first thing is going to be routes plural and then route singular from React Router DOM. And again, this will allow you to have different pages. And this is where we are defining those pages. So then inside of here, I am going to go ahead and have all of my routes be inside of this routes component. And then each of these will be their own route. So routes is you have an opening and closing, and then route here is a self-closing tag. So I'm going to do the home page first. I don't have anything in there quite yet. So let me go ahead and generate some folders. So I'm going to create a folder in here, call it components. And make sure that your folder names are lowercase. And then inside of here, I'm going to create another one called shared. So that way, because we did that setting at the beginning of class, it won't show it as component/shared. It will just say shared here as another embedded folder. So that's what compact folder does, is that if it only has one folder, it will only show on one line instead of multiple levels. I'm also going to have another folder within components called list for my model. So that is for my list model that we'll have here. So inside of components, I have lists in the shared folder here. So I just did a right-click new folder. Or you can do this button, or you can do like a make directory, but make sure that you're inside of the client source folder if you were to do it like that. So I just like to do right-click new folder. That works the best. So we'll just have that here. What we are going to do is that the element that I am going to render out for my home page is going to be called home. And inside of there, it would be a home component that I will have inside of my shared folder. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So that one will be home from ./components/shared. I'm going to go one more level deep of home and then be home.js like so. The reason being is that it looks like I have a lot more components within the home component all in one particular section. So that way we're not building the whole thing per se, we're just building individual parts. So to break this up a little bit more is that this is going to be a component, which is the nav bar. That's its own component, but that will render on each screen. So we'll tackle that a little bit later. This one here is like the title. So that could be a component that we'll be using is the title component, the home title, and then we'll also have a, looks like it is like a feature section. So like a feature component and then the prices component here. So that's what we'll go ahead and do. So yeah, so here is your app.js. And then we'll go ahead and build out the home real quick. So we'll do a new folder inside of the share, call it home. And then inside of the home, there will be a new file called home. And what I am going to do is that this is where the home page is. So I'm going to have 3 sections. One of them is going to be the home title. This is from the same folder of home title. So I need to create that in a sec. I'll also have a features from /features. So that will cover this section here. And then I'll also have one more of prices from /prices. So I need to create those sections as well. And then here, when I am going to render out my home component, all it is that it's just rendering all of those different sections inside of the home. So that is what will make up the home page, is all of those home title, features, and prices. So this would be home title. This one will be features. And then this one will be price. So again, this is depending on how we have your home page. So that's what our home.js will look like. Inside of the home, let's go ahead and create these different sections. So let's do our home title real quick. This one will be cons home title. And what I am going to do is that it just looks like it's just a regular title. So it just says welcome to to-do list. So I'll just have that be in an H1 of welcome to to-do list. So that's this section right here. Again, it's just the content and kind of like what we are having as functionality. It doesn't have to be exact. And we'll go ahead and style that a lot later. Let me go ahead and slack this out again. So there is your home. And then here is your home title. Oh, sorry. Let me put that in a coding block. There we go. And then let's do the other parts as well. So it'll be features.js, and this will be const features, and this would also be pretty simple to export features. So then it has one big H1 that says come see all of our features. So let's do that real quick. Go to H1, come see all of our features. And it also has like smaller headers and paragraphs. So, and there's 4 of them. So I'm just gonna copy and paste one a lot as well. So then I am going to do H4, it looks like feature 1, and then a paragraph of a bunch of text. I'm gonna do this a bit, just typing on my keyboard, and then I'll just copy that 3 more times. So it'll be feature 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's this section right here. So that's what this will display. So here is our feature component. And then what we are going to do last is going to be the price component here. New file price. And then with this, I am going to go ahead and let me see. Looks like these are in like they're all in my boxes. So it says price here, boxes. So I'll put that in a div and then like a H4 and then some paragraphs, and it looks like, yeah, another box there. So let's just do that real quick. So cons prices equals prices. And then we'll export default this before we forget. And then I'm actually going to also do our H3 of prices. And then I don't know, I think for each of these boxes there will be a div. So I'll put a div here, and then within one div, that could be an image. So I'll just do like a little image here, but it'll just be empty for now. So that could be an image, and then another text here. So that'll be my H4 of bronze. And then this would have another one of H5 of basic. And then it has 3 paragraphs, it looks like. Or it could be an unordered list. Yeah, that looks like an unordered list. So UL, and then with this, I'll do li of feature, and then we'll have 3 of those. So that will handle those, and then the box and a money sign. Feature 1, 2, and 3. We'll have another one here of money sign. Okay. So I guess that's what it is. We'll go ahead and fix that a little bit later. Go have that twice. So one for bronze, one for silver. Yeah, and that one is mid. And one for gold. And what does it say? Extra. And then this would be $3 signs. Oh, a lot more. Sure. So yeah, that's what we'll have for the prices. Again, it's just mainly going to lay it out. We'll come back to it where there's a little bit more better wireframes for us to work with. So here is our prices. Let's do a similar thing for the about. Let's actually run our server to see how that looks like. So we can see if that is correct. We'll move on to the about and then the list. Oh, and the nav bar. Nav bar should be another one as well. Yeah, it looks like this one doesn't have a footer, so we don't need to do footers, just a nav bar. So yeah, let's go ahead and run our server. So this one will be yarn start. That will be in your client. And then what we'll do here inside of your regular one is bundle exec rails s-p 3001. So whatever number you put here, that should match up with your proxy. So you put 3432, then this should also be 3432. But this number is 301. This number is 3001. So that's what we'll have here. So go ahead and run both servers. I'll leave this up for a second. And if you want to know where that command is, it's in the lecture notes for sure. But inside of your sheets at the very bottom on the right-hand side, this is how to start your server here. So if you ever need to start or restart your server, this is what you would need to do. And then this is like the new panel thing that you would need to do here. And then this is how you would stop a server. So that's your Rails and your React server that you have. Looks like we have prices, so it doesn't know what that is. I accidentally spelt the file name incorrectly. So this should be named prices plural. So make sure that inside of your file name, it is prices plural, not singular. I had a little typo there. Yeah. And there we go. That is our homepage. Again, we'll make it look pretty a little bit later on, but this is a good start, right? So now we have one page done, kind of layout wise and content wise in a sense. So let's do all of that again, but now inside of the about. So the about one should be a little bit shorter. Looks like it has one title and then like a meets a team section. And then looks like these are like images. And then we'll do the nav bar. So let's create a new folder here. Well, actually, we need to start off in the app.js. Make a new route for this. This route will go into the about, and then this one will also go to the about as well. So let's have it both be going from our about. We'll go ahead and import about from our /component/shared /about/capital about like so. Go ahead, Brian.
Sorry, I don't have a way to rename that file in code. Do I have to do it outside of code?
It's just 2-finger click and then rename here.
Oh, I wonder why I didn't show it before. Okay, thank you.
Yep. I think if you also double click this, sometimes it will do it. But I usually just do 2-finger click.
Okay, and then I was trying to figure that out and I missed what happened after that, sorry.
Yeah, so we just went into the app.js and then we just added this line of code. I'll slack this out.
Okay.
So here is your app.js. We basically added a whole nother page for your about page. And then let's go ahead and create that for it to work. So we'll create a new folder here, call it about, and then we'll have another file in here also called about. And then this is where we'll have our different sections. So we'll have one for the about section. So the about title from, not from React, this is just right next door. And then we'll also go ahead and import, just call it team. Yeah, we'll just call that component team from team here. And then what we'll go ahead and do is that inside of our about component, we're just going to display both of those components here. And that will make up the about component page. So this will be export default about. And then this one would be your about title. And this one will be your team. So I just create another folder within shared called about and another file within there within the about folder called capital about. And then here is the content of that particular file. Next thing is that we need to create 2 files for both of those components. One is called the about title. So let's do that. And then it looks like this one is just a cons about title, not passing in anything. And what the title would be, we'll take a look at that in a sec after we export default about title. So it looks like this one is about the app and then a paragraph. Each one of about the app and then a paragraph of just random text. I'm just gonna button mash a few things there. Sure. So here is the about title. And then we have one more of the team. So this will be cons team. Inside of here, I'll have those team things. And then this will be export default team. Let's see what I have here. So it looks like I have one header, and then it looks like I have some images, 6 images, and then each of the image has like a small title. So let's just do that one header of meet the team. Is that what it says? Yeah, meet the team. And then looks like we have like a H5 of member 1. And then each of those would be an image. This should be self-closing. And I might put this in its own div just because it looks like each member has their own section, it looks like. So then I'm going to do this 5 more times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm missing one more. That one is 6. So here is the team section for our about. So let me make sure there aren't any errors. So if I go to /about, yeah, that would work there. Okay, 2 more things and then we'll go into the list. The first thing is what happens when we aren't going into the right route. And the other thing is that we need to go into our nav bar. So let's do that part next. So this one will be import our no match. So this is what happens when we aren't going into a right route. This will give us an error page instead of displaying nothing. And it will also navigate to your homepage as well. So this one should be called no match. So that will be the last route that we have here, and it will just be /star, and this one will be called no match like so. So here is your app.js. We'll build that out real quick as well. And this will go ahead and capture that particular error for if they navigate to a page that isn't defined inside of our app.js. So that would be in your shared folder. So that will be a new file within the shared folder. It's not inside of another folder. So this one will be called no match. And then I do need to import my link because I want to navigate them back to the home page. This one is coming from my React Router DOM. This one will be called no match. And what I am going to say is like a 404 page not found. And then I'll navigate them back to the home page. So I'll just have it say 404 page not found. And then we'll go ahead and link them back to the home page. So capital L link. This one will say return home. And then this one will go to your home route. So this URL is matching up with the one that we defined here for the path name. And that will go ahead and navigate to the right component that we need to there. So again, this is within the components and then shared, and it is its own file here. So this is the no match here. Now we'll cover if I go to like /pizza. And then that will say 404 page not found because that's not a page that we defined. And we'll return home. And this is our home page. One more thing is to have a navigational bar. So that way they know where and how to navigate. So that one will also be in /component/shared /nav bar. And then since this is render out every single page, because here is the nav bar, I'm showing that here within the home, within the about, within the list, and all of the future pages, then it should go outside of the routes. So this will go ahead and display it on top of all your pages on every single page. So it should go outside of the routes like so. If it's the footer, you will put it below the routes, but if it's a nav bar, it will go above. So here is the app.js one more time. And then we are going to go ahead and create that nav bar inside of the shared. Like so. And this will go ahead and we need to import the link because we are navigating internally. So we need that from React Router DOM. If it's externally, like if you want to go to like your Facebook or Instagram, you can just use an A tag. You don't have to use a link. It won't work. So an A tag is what you would need for external. A link is for more internal stuff. Like if you want to go in between the pages for this navigation here. So then it will be const. This will be called nav bar. And then we'll do export default nav bar. And let's see what this nav bar is. So most likely this is a link to return home. And there's also 3 other links, one to go to home, about, and the list. So let's have 4 links. One of them is going to be in an H1 that says to-do list. But this one is technically a link. So I'll wrap that around a link tag. Going to home. And put this up here for the nav bar. And then I'll have another link tag. Well, actually, since this is navigation, let's wrap everything in a nav. And then inside of here, it'll be a UL. And then each of these items will be LI. But not the to-do list because it's not part of that. It's just all of the other ones like home, about, and lists. We'll do that. So then if it is like that, I'll go ahead and do a link. And then have this go to. And then in here, this will be my LI of, I think this was home. And then let's do 2 more links, one to go to the about. So that will go to /about because this route and this route should match. And then one more for us to go and navigate, which is going to be our list. And we haven't created that component yet. So this would be /list, this would be /list, like so. So that should take us to this page, this to-do list page here. So those are the 3 pages we're dealing with thus far. So here is your nav bar. And as you can see, in the front end is a lot more to manage because we're breaking up our pages into small manageable parts. So we are jumping around to make these pages happen. So yeah, so that should take us home. This should take us to the about, and it does. Let me zoom in a bit so you can see. This should take us to the list, and we don't have a list, so this is good because we don't have a page for it yet. That should take us home. So our navigation and our main pages should be all good to go except for this, and that's what we're working on next. Okay, so that's a little bit about React Router, which is going to be creating different pages. And if you want to create a page, you need to create a route for that. And that's what we have here. And usually with pages, you don't have one component, you have multiple components sometimes as well. So that's why the home has like the home title, feature, and prices, is because we're just breaking these up into different components like so. You can technically have them all in one, but we just have them broken up into components, so it's a little bit easier to manage. And if one thing breaks, like let's say if prices break, only that section is broken. If we were to put them all in one location, if prices break, then the whole thing would also break. So that's kind of help us to error handle a little bit later, is that if we do have something else that is broken or it doesn't look right, it will narrow down our search of which section it is that we are having instead of scrolling down a whole long HTML or a JS file. Okay, I'm actually going to close everything out real quick. Going to go back into your client source components, and we're going to go into your app.js, and let's create the list page, and we'll get started on our CRUD actions. And that will be the bulk of the functionality for this first level. But is there any questions about React Router with the navigation or the different pages that we have here? Go ahead, Brian.
So you're moving kind of fast tonight, and so I'm trying to keep up, but I've got an error compiled with problems in my app.js.
Yep.
The component shared navbar. I think I missed something somewhere.
Yeah. So the most up-to-date app.js should be there inside of Slack, so that shouldn't give you an error. I think where it could be giving you an error is that we need to double check if the nav bar is in the right folder. So the nav bar should be located in your component, shared, and then it's a file within the shared folder. So component, share,
Oh,
and
yeah,
nav bar.
I've got it in my home folder.
Yes. So you can just drag and drop it into the shared, and that will put in the right location. Same with the no match as well.
Yeah, I've got no match in the right spot. Okay, let me try that now.
And then also the content of navbar should be on Slack as well.
Okay, yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Sweet. So yeah, it's a little bit tough with these different directories because there's going to be inside of one folder versus the other folder. So it's good to double check like the breadcrumbs and everything like that. Sweet. Any other questions? Okay. So yeah, we can spend a lot more time with the app and the home and the page and all that. But that's just two of the many pages that we need to finish. The main ones that will take us with the most functionality are the list component here. So let's go ahead and get started on the list. Let's just get to a page just for the list itself for it to work. And then we'll knock out some of the CRUD actions, especially we can knock out some of them pretty quickly because we have some dummy data. So we can go ahead and do like the all list and the show list all in one go too. So if we need to make another page, that would be inside of our app.js. And let me see here. I am going to put it in the list folder. That's where I'm going to have this file. So I am going to go ahead and import my list, plural, from /components/list, plural, and it'll be capital file list, like so. So that will be a component I would make. Let's make another route. Make sure that when you make another route, it is before the no match. Because if you have it under the no match, it wouldn't consider that a route because of it goes from top to bottom. So make sure that this one is going to be list. And then this one is also going to be list like so. Spelled correctly. There we go. So that's what we are going to have. So if you were to do it like this, it won't work. This will be unreachable because it only reads this. And this means that any route other than the ones above, then it will be no match. So if you were to put it like this, it will only show the no match. So make sure the no match is at the very bottom. Everything else is at the top. I think the new React Router version solves that problem, but you might be working with older versions. So it's just good practice to put this at the bottom anyways. So here is your app.js, and that will go ahead and establish a page for us to have for our list. That wasn't what I copied. So yeah, let me edit that message. That was the same message. There we go. So that is the content of our app.js. This one here, we are going to go more into our list like so. So inside of the component list folder and then capital L list, this is where we'll go ahead and start to build out our pattern, and everything here is at this level. So looks like, yeah, nothing too crazy. We'll have all of our forms and everything as well. So we'll get that started. So let's go ahead and follow the pattern. This pattern should be up to date now. Let me see here. It would follow this pattern here with hooks. So we'll go ahead and import a few things from that. So I'm inside of my list.js. Let's go ahead and import my useState, as well as my useEffect from React. And then I also need to import Axios from Axios because I need to go ahead and perform these CRUD actions both in the front end and the back end. And then we can go ahead and build out the component. This one is called list component. This one would be curly brace because I am going to have different functions. And I am going to do export default list. Awesome. So then let's go ahead and create our initial state of how we are going to be storing them. So what we are going to be storing is a bunch of lists inside of our state. And then the function to change them should be set list, like so. And then we'll do a useState empty array for now. Let me zoom out a bit. There we go. So that will go ahead and store it all within the array. So essentially what we are doing in the back end is that we'll grab all of them, and then inside of the front end, we'll go ahead and store them inside of here. And then we're calling that list, and then to change that is called set list. So let's go ahead and do our useEffect. And now because that we have data within our database, this should show up within our state. So let's go ahead and use effect here. Use effect, and I'll kind of explain what this will do, but let me write it out and then we'll go ahead and go through what this does. So with this, I need to do an Axios call to go to my index route for my list. So I need to go to Rails, localhost 3000 and 1/rails/info/routes. So this URL will go ahead and open up your routes of what you have inside of your config, and then routes. These are what they are creating here as these routes here. So this is where we are going to have, in combination with the HTTP verb and the path, with both of those, if we match them up, they will go ahead and lead somewhere inside of the controller. So we want to do a particular action, like let's say index, which is what we are currently doing. we need to go ahead and match up the HTTP verb and the URL pattern. So if I want to go to the index route, it'll be a GET request. That's the HTTP verb. And then here is the URL. So GET request HTTP verb like so. So then following that, it will be .get because this is a GET. And then the URL is going to be this here. So /API/list. So that will go ahead and define that I'm going to my index. And then it'll run the stuff that I put inside of my controller. And we'll talk about that in a sec. And then we'll do our promise handling of what happens when we get what we ask for. So that's what this then will do. And what this then, I'm just going to do it in one line, actually. I'm going to do a set list of res.data. And then error is that I'm just going to cache the error. So let me comment out what this does, and then we'll kind of see it more in action. So what this will do here is that I am going to go ahead and what the use effect does is that this will run the code before I display anything on the screen. So run the code before I display on the screen. And what I'm running is that I'm making an Axios call. So this Axios call will run my index action. So this will run my index action in my controller. So let's take a look at that. What is that index action doing in the controller? So let's go into your app controller API list controller. You can see on my screen, you don't have to navigate there. This is what is running. So what is running is that it is all of the lists return as JSON. So this will return all of your lists from your database. So this will return all our lists from our database. If we have any. If it doesn't, if we don't have any lists, then it won't return anything at all. It'll just return an empty array. What this run will do is that this will go ahead and grab all of the lists and store it within our state. So grab all the lists from our database and store within our list, within our state. So again, components will have state, and that is for storage. So that is where we're having it. It's within this particular array here. And then if anything goes wrong, it will just console log error. We'll handle this a lot better later on, but that's what this is doing. So that is for the index, but this will kind of work if we go to lists here. And if you go ahead and go into your list and then inside of your components and inside of your, let's just search up list. You can see inside of our state here, let me open this up so it's a little bit better. So I just went into my dev tools and then you just search up list. With this list, we are going to go ahead and this is all the list is coming within our database, is this here inside of the state hook. So to finish this off, what I have here, we would need to go ahead and display that here. And we'll go ahead and do that in a sec. I actually want to work inside of the create first because the form is one of the things that the user first sees. So I want to get that up and running before I go ahead and work on this section here. So let's do that part next after a break. Let's take a quick break. We'll go ahead and come back at 10:20 and we'll go ahead and create the form for the create action. So here is my list component and that should be good. And I will see you all at 8:20. Okay, before break, we went through different pages and all of our routes, and then we actually got started within our list page here. So I'm actually going to kind of slow down a bit and put a lot of notes on this so you can actually look for what to understand of what each component does. Because each component, they might be called very similar names. So you need to go ahead and we'll distinguish from one component to the other. So I'm just gonna put a lot of notes on this so you can actually see what it is that we are doing and then the different parts of what we are doing here. Because I know that this is one of the aspects that we need to go more into is this the front end part here. So with this list component here, should name it something else because of what we are going to do later, is that this is going to be in charge of all of our CRUD action functions for now. So in charge of all of our CRUD actions. And then it should display all of the different components that make up the list page. So what I mean by that is that this whole page is for the list that we have here. And we are displaying the form, we're displaying all of them inside of a particular list as well. So that's what this is also doing, is that it is displaying the components that make up the list page that make up the list page. That's what this component is in charge of. And then what we are having here is that this is where we are storing all of the lists. So storing all our list items in our front end. This is state that we have here. And then this function is how we are going to be changing that value. So you can see here, we're changing that value by grabbing all of the items from our database and storing them within our state here. And we're doing that within a use effect. So it runs it right before we display anything onto the screen. And that's what we'll be getting started for, is that with this component, we'll just knock out one CRUD action at a time. You can write it all out if you want to, but it's really hard to test that way, especially if you have errors. It's kind of hard to narrow down where it is that you are having troubles with. So that's why I would recommend you to just do it one level at a time. So for example, let's just tackle this create function first. So it looks like this is going to be a form, and then I just need to build out a form and have that be submitted there. So that will take care of the create functionality. So let's go ahead and look at that pattern, see how that is filled up. And then we'll talk a little bit more about what that does here. So let's take a look at this. So here is the pattern for the add. So let's go ahead and do that here. And I'll just put a note that this is for the create functionality, or I'll just say add action, because that's technically what it's doing inside of your backend. So then this would be a const. Following that pattern is the add list here. It needs a list item that we are going to be adding. And here we are also doing an axials call. But again, we need to look up what this is, because this might be a little bit different because of the way that we are handling it. So going into our routes, we are going to go into the create functionality, because again, this is handling our add feature. So this should go ahead and create it inside of our database as well. So to get to that aspect of our controller, we need to go ahead and do a post request /API/list. So this will be a post. So then this should also be a post. And then the URL would be /API/list. That's what this is here. /list. And that's how we are going to get into the create function inside of our controller. So that will run our create functionality there. So let's go ahead and continue on to the pattern. I am also going to go ahead and pass in the list object. And then here I am going to do my promise handling. So what I am going to do here is that with the response coming back, and then we'll cache the errors here, I am going to go ahead and do a set list like so. And then I'm going to spread out everything that was already there that I am storing. And then I'm going to return res.data. And we'll talk about what this does real quick. and we'll put lots of notes as well. So here, this is our add functionality. We're following this particular pattern. This one will console log the error if anything does go wrong. What this first line will do, oh, well, actually, let's talk about this line real quick. So with this add action, I need to pass in a list object. Pass in a list object. That's what this is here, is that it is expecting you to pass in a list object that you are creating. That's what this value that we have here. So what this line of code is that it actually does a few things. The first thing that it does is that it will go ahead and it will match up that particular request and it will run the create action within your controller. So run the create action within the controller. Because that's what this does, is that it matches up the HTTP verb and the URL. Based off of those two, that will lead you into one of these routes. So because we're doing a post /API/list, that goes to our create. So let's take a look at what that does. But something else that we are doing is that we also pass in the list that we are passing in within our function. So what this will do is that this will go ahead and put our list element here into an object called list. And then the key value pairs is called list. The value is going to be another object. And that would be whatever the items that we need to create a list. So a title would be like grocery. Description would be like food for the week. Sure, that works. So that's what we are passing in as lists, is that it would be, at first, it will just be this object, which is just a title and the description. And then here, we are going to pass that in here within an object of the key being a list and the value being the object that we are passing in as the list here. So with that in mind, we are going to the list controller, because this will go into your create. It will try to create a new list with using the list params. So that will go ahead and lead you inside of here. And it will check if yours is the exact same as what we have here param wise. So this is what we have within our front end, which is like, for example, we're creating a list called groceries, and then the description is food for the week. So it will take that and it will go ahead and check for if it is called list. That's what this means here. And then also it checks for a title, and it also checks for the description, because only those fields are permitted. If it is something else, or if it's called something differently, then it won't be permitted. Like, for example, if I have this say name, because I'm only permitting title, this is not permitted. So that will give you an error saying that your name is not permitted. But if it is title, this and this, that's permitted, then it will work. The other thing that it will do when we go ahead and save it is that it will go ahead and check your validations. So one thing that it will go through is inside of your model, your list model, and it checks for if you have a title in the description. And in this case, you do. So that passes. The other validation is that the title is unique. So if the title is unique, then there won't be that particular title within your database. So it will go ahead and it'll check through all of the database, see if there is anything with that. And it is case sensitive as well as spelling sensitive as well. So if it has like a lowercase groceries in the database, but this one has uppercase, then this is permitted because it will go through as a different one because it is technically unique. So that's a unique value that it will also check as well. So if both of those validations are working and that is both permitted and everything looks good, then we'll go ahead and save it and then return the list back to the front end. So that new list that we created, which is this right here, it will go ahead and create that and we'll return that back to the front end, or else it'll give us an error. So that's what the back end is doing with that data. So that's where we have our lists. It will go ahead and put it in the right format, go into the controller, check it off with the params and the create here. Go ahead, Brian.
What are some ways that you could, like, would you want to convert things into lowercase before they hit the database? If you wanted to make sure, capital grocery and lowercase grocery is unique.
Yeah, that really depends on the validation. So like, especially with numbers, or if you have like capital or lowercase or anything like that, you would need to convert whatever it needs to into the right data types as well. So we wouldn't do that here at this level. We would actually do it within the form. So I'll show you inside of the form where we can kind of make sure that the data is what we are expecting. So that will be more in the form level. This level here, that is just handling more of the action. So yeah, we'll talk about that more in the form. That's a good question. Sweet. So yeah, so I didn't really do much inside of here, but I'll slack out the controller unless you want to see that note as well. And let me go ahead and re-slack out the list, but I'm actually going to go and create our form next. Oh, so sorry, going back to this, when we go ahead and grab that data back, that's what this is here. So what we are doing here is that this is essentially adding into the front end. So adding the new item to our front end. I'll just do front end like this. And what this will do is that we are creating a new array. And inside of that new array, we are spreading out all of the lists that were already there. So that will keep all the ones that were already there. So spread out all the lists that was already there. Essentially, like keep all of them that were there. Keep all the ones that are there. And then at the end, because we put this at the end, so after all those, we are going to add in that new item into the array as well. At the end, add in the new item from our backend. Because again, when we do res.data, that is the return result of what we are returning back as JSON. So here, the return result for if this is successful, then this will be the new created list. So that will go ahead and it will have a new array with all the lists that was already there, and then another one that was newly created. So that will go ahead and create that from your front end. Okay, so let's actually implement this in the form, and then we'll validate our information in the form as well. So let's go ahead and let's see here. We are going to go ahead and call this list form from, man, this is going to be weird. You'll sometimes switch the word for from and form a lot too. It happens to me all the time. It's totally fine. Just make sure that they make sense here. So here, we are going to be importing list form from the exact same folder. So we'll create that in a sec. But the first thing that we need to do is to display that here of our list form. And this form is going to be in charge of our add here. So let's go ahead and also add in our add functionality. So let's do that here. So the add list, that is the function for us to add a particular list into our backend and our front end. And this is how we render items as well as to pass in the function from one component to another. So this is to display a component and pass in the add function to the component to use. So you need to do this step here, because if I want to add within my form, I need to call the function. If I don't have this step and I call that function, it doesn't know what that is. I'll show you that error as well. And you can, I'll show you how to debug that particular error there. So here is the list with a bunch of comments here to help you out with some of the items here. And then we'll actually oh my goodness, I did it again. We're actually going to go ahead and work on the form next. And again, today isn't really about finishing up the model for the list. We can do that more tomorrow as well. The main thing is to kind of review everything as a whole and how things work and how things connect. And a little bit of talking about the seeds file too. So let me see what that will give us. I think it would give us an error because we don't have that yet. Yeah, I don't have that component yet. Let's go ahead and work with that real quick to get that up and running. So let me go ahead and within the same folder of inside of your source component list, plural, and this would be list form. So then inside of this list form, we are going to import the use state because we are going to store in the items. But let me go ahead and type out the component first, and then we'll explain what this component does and what each of the part will do as well. So then here, I am going to define my list form. And let's say, for example, I didn't pass anything at all. This will give me an error later on. So let's just do this real quick so you can see that error that will arise later on. But technically, we should pass in the prop that we pass into this component. So we'll just leave it as is for now, and I'll show you that error and then how to fix that error. So then here within our form, let's go ahead and also export default the list form as well. And what we are going to do here is that with this form, this is going to, for now, is going to be in charge of your add. So it will be in charge of your add functionality function here. And how it will do that is that it will display a bunch of inputs. So display some inputs for each field of that object. So we'll have a field for title and another field for description, and then another field for if it has anything else. So we'll have a place for them to choose each of those elements that we have there. And then we'll also run some logic on when we are having the user type into the input, it will save it into the state. So have the user type in the input and save it to state. The last thing that we need to do is what happens when we handle submit is that that's when they're already done filling out the form and then they press the submit button. What we want to happen with that submit button. So this is when we are handling submit, we want to run the add function, So that will technically go ahead and trigger a chain reaction, and it will run the add function here. And then that will go ahead and link it up to the routes. It will then link it up into the controller. After that is done, it will spit it back out, and then we'll run the code here, and then we'll go back to the form. So the flow does really jump around here and there. Okay. So that's what we are going to be doing inside of this form. It's mainly to capture the user input, save that somewhere within our state. And then when they hit submit, we need to go ahead and do some sort of a particular CRUD action. In this case, we are doing a create. So first things first is that let's go ahead and have a place for them to go ahead and store whatever it is that they're typing in. That's what this is really good for. So I'll call it list as well. We'll call it set list to change the element that we are using. And then it will be an object of whatever initial fields that we have for the object of the list. So let me show you what I mean by that. So list here has a title and a description. So by default, what do you want the default value is for initially when they fill out the form? So by default, the title should be blank. There shouldn't be anything for the title. Same thing for the description as well. It should be blank as well. So this might change depending on different data types. So let's say that you are also storing I'll do this for notes. So this would be commented out later. So let's say that you are also doing age. So default value would be 0. The reason being is that this is going to be an integer data type, right? So that's something that you could have as the initial value would be age 0. And then another one would be, it would be similar if you have like price, that would be like 0.0 because it is a float. And then if it's a Boolean, like let's say that if they are friendly, that one would be either defaulted as true or defaulted as false. So make sure that you have those different fields depending on their data type. That will be their initial data type here of what you want it to start off with. So that's what we have here. So let me kind of write that out here is this is where we are storing the user input. And then it also has initial values for each of the fields and their data types. For each field and data types. So that's what this use state is doing. So then the next thing here inside of the return is mainly to build out how the form will look like. So build out the form of how it looks like. And the other thing is that each of the fields should have their own input. So each field should have their own input. So there would be one input for title, one input for description, because that's what makes up that object is the title and description. If you have these fields too, then you'll have one for title, one for description, one for age, one for price, one for a Boolean of friendly there. So that's what you would need is that it would match up of whatever fields you have for your object. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how to make up this form. So it looks like we have one header here of create list, and then we have two inputs, one for the title, one for the description, and then a submit button here. So let's go ahead and create that. So then we'll have a form here. Let me zoom in a bit. Within this form, I want to do a event handler of on submit, and that will go ahead and run a handle submit function. What that means is that when I submit the form, it should run this logic of what I have in this function here. And we'll talk about handle submit in a sec. So we'll talk about that real quick after we fill everything out. But essentially, when I hit the submit button, it should run this logic that I have inside of here. So it should run this function. So then we need to have an input field inside of our form. And then again, it should match up with each of these fields as well as their data types. Later on tomorrow, inside of our next example within to do, I'm actually going to have a lot more different fields, and it would be a variation of different data types. So I'll have one of Boolean, one of integer, and then one of string. So you can kind of see the different inputs here. But for now, let's just do just the text and the string here, so you can kind of see what that would work with. So this one is going to be your input for the title. So input for the title. This is what a comment looks like in JSX, because again, this is a JSX file. I just did command question mark to kind of work with that. The three things that you need, so need these three things in the input. And all inputs, because there's actually different kinds of inputs. The three things that you would need is name, value, as well as your on change. Those are the three things that you are going to need. What they are for is that if what the name is that what is this input for? So this one is for the title. So what is this input for? I'm actually going to put this like this. Does that display anything I don't want? I don't know. Yeah. So that's what this name is for, is that what is this field for? So this field is for the title. The value will go ahead and be where we are storing this particular item. So this one will be stored in the list title. So that would be this list object title value, like so. So list title. So where we are storing the value. And then this would be how we're storing it. So how we are storing the value. So those are the three things that we need. To do the on change, what it would be is that it would be a function that requires E. E is the event of them typing in whatever it is inside of this input. So E is the event of typing in the input. What we are going to be doing is that we are going to store what they are typing into state. So it'll be set state of whatever that was already stored within state to be whatever they are typing in. And whatever they're typing in, we can grab that as e.target.value. And that would be the title for the field that we are doing. So E is the event that we are typing into the input. And then essentially what we are doing here is that we are storing the value into our state. So storing the value into our state. How we are doing that is that we are storing all the fields that were already stored, all the fields that were already stored. That's what this means, is that we are grabbing all the fields that were already stored, but the title is what the user typed inside of this input, is what the user typed. So name, value, and on change. The other ones are optional. This one is required. That one is a front-end validation to make sure that they fill out this particular field. So this is really good to handle the validation of presence true, is that if they don't fill this out and they hit submit, then it would hit that particular field. But because I have required, that means that you can't really submit yet until you fill out this field. So that will help you out with if you were to go ahead and submit, but you need to fill this out first before you submit. So this will make sure you fill it out before you submit. And then the other one is placeholder of what text it will show within the input. So that would just say title. So text within the box, within the input box. Go ahead, Brian.
So the required there, that's just to make sure that the submit button can't be pushed without it, but our validation is different. So they could push the submit button, but it wouldn't be put into the database. We just wouldn't know that.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Because we need to have validation at multiple levels. This is how one way to validate in the front end is to do this required bit.
Okay, and if you had that required but didn't have the validation on the back end, would that be, is that redundant at that point, or do you still need both validations?
You still need both validations. Let me actually show you why. Let me go ahead and create a submit button real quick. So I'll just do button here, and this will say submit. This one will be a type of submit. So let me show you with and without this required field first, and then we will also go into what happens if we have that validation versus if we don't have that validation as well, and we'll kind of go into that. This one will be type of submit. So with this validation, if I go ahead and submit this right now, I didn't fill anything out, it would give me this required thing saying that please fill this field out. That's the front end validation, is this required bit here. But if I don't have that, that will go ahead and it will go ahead and submit the form anyways. And when it submit the form, if I have it all connected, it will then go into my controller, double check the controller. It is passing in the title and the description, but then when I do the save, it will go ahead and stop us at the validation because there is a validation of presence true. So that will bounce back an error at us, but it won't bounce us back at this particular error. It will bounce us back an error within our terminal. So that will show an error within our terminal. Later on, we can display that more in the front end, but for now, it will just won't do anything in the front end. It will just display an error within the terminal there. If you don't have a validation here, but you have a individual required here, that will go ahead and it will allow you to not submit it. But then if you go ahead and type in something in and submit it, the backend validation isn't really required. So it's not matching up with both front end and backend validations. So that's why you would need to do at multiple levels. So that way it would be transparent throughout. So since we are requiring it here, we should also require it here as well in our model. The other thing is that because this is the front end, right now I have everything required as well as validated for presence of true. It's really simple to change inside of the HTML, especially inside of the input box. I can actually remove this by just deleting it within the HTML within the DevTools here, and that will actually take off the front end validation. So that's why we have other validations after we submit the form and within our controller, within our models, also within our database, and that will go ahead and stop it at one of those locations. So that way, even though that they went ahead and submitted an empty one and also found a workaround of not having it required, they still won't be able to create it because it's hitting one of those level of validations. So to answer your question, I guess is that we need to have them all throughout, just so that it will be multiple levels of security, as well as it will validate the data, especially of how it is that we want it. So we do want it within the model controller with the params and then the database. And then last, inside of our form, it is a good idea to have that be required as well. Yeah. That's a good question. Something else that I like to add is like a label that will go ahead and it will label what your input is for. So that one's pretty self-explanatory of what that does. So this one will just say title. And that's what we have here. So that will handle the input for the title. The other thing that we need to have is the input for your text description. So because description is a slightly bigger field, it actually is a text instead of a string. So the difference between those different data types is that a string only holds a certain number of characters. A text can hold even more than a string. So that's why if you want to hold a more text or more characters, you would need to do it into a text data type because it does store a lot more than your average string data type. For a text data type, so for text data types, I would recommend, it will still work if you use the input, it will just look weird. I would recommend you to use a text area, just because it will give you a little bit more room for you to type in a lot of items within that particular box. So instead of a small box, it will be a bigger box. That's what this is a text area. Within the text area, right before you are ending your first, like your opening and closing, we're actually going to put the required items right here. So make sure that you have it right before your individual like greater than sign at your beginning text area. That's where we are going to put these needed items here. So following that same pattern, we need a name of what this field is for. This is for the description. And then we need a value of where we are storing it. We're storing it within the list dot description. Afterwards, we need to have a function to go ahead and store whatever they type within our state. So then it will be on change. And then inside of here, we are going to go ahead and have the event here. And then we are doing a similar thing as what we did up here. But what we are doing in here is that we are keeping everything that was already stored within our state, but the description will be whatever they typed in here. It would be e.target.value. So this text area, because I filled it out here and it has description here, here, and here, it knows with all that information that this particular box, whatever I am typing in, it will store that for the description. Similar thing of what I have here, because I have the name of title, value of title and title here for this input, whatever I put here, this will go ahead and store whatever I have for the title. So let me kind of show you that within the dev tools within the form. I'll do this so you don't have to, so you can kind of take a look at stuff. Here is the form, your list form. Pay attention to the hooks for the state. So if I go ahead and type in this will go ahead and store it within my storage, within my state here. So this one will be like grocery. And that would go ahead and store regardless of whatever I type. So I can just do grow, things like that. And then this is food I want to eat. And that's what I have there. So and that will go ahead and it will go ahead and store it within your description. So those are your different inputs, and you repeat the process until you go ahead and have all of the fields that you need for that object. Because the list object only has title and description, we only need to have these two inputs here. The last thing that we need to do is what happens when we do a submit. And right now, if we go ahead and submit, it does a few things. The first thing that it does is that it refreshes the page. We don't want that to happen because as soon as we refresh the page, it loses all the data that I typed in. So whatever I type in here, if I go ahead and press submit, it loses that data. We don't want that. The other thing is that it also posted the information in your URL, which is a little bit weird because we don't want it in the URL. We actually want it in a different place. So that's the other thing that we don't want to happen. But both of these things that happen within the form is the default things that it will do if you do submit a form. So one thing that we do inside of our handle submit function is to prevent the default from happening. So e.prevent default. So what this function is doing is that this is what will happen when we submit the form. So what happens when we submit the form? First thing that happens is that we need to prevent the default. So stop from reloading, losing our data from state. And we also need to stop putting stuff in the URL, putting the input in the URL. We don't want that. So now that I have that code, now that whatever I go ahead and type here and submit, it will still store that within my state and it won't post it or it won't reload as well. So that's what I want. So I still want it within my state. The next thing that I'm going to do is that this is where my add functionality will come into play. So right now, let's go ahead and call add list and then pass in the list of where I am storing within my state. So this will go ahead and add function within my list. And then I'm passing in the list I'm storing from state. Pass in the list I'm storing in state. So that will actually give us an error. And you'll get to see this error a lot, is that sometimes you would call a function or a variable that you don't have access to. So what is one thing that you think that we are missing with the add list here? So where is this add list coming from? Does anyone remember? what component that add list is coming from?
I was going to ask you the same thing.
Yeah. So where is the add list coming from? So the add list is actually coming from our list component. And again, our list component plural is where we define all of our CRUD actions. So anywhere with CRUD actions, whether we are doing an update or a delete or add, that would be inside of this component here of list. So our list component here, this is where our add function is defined. That's this function that we wrote a little bit ago. So this add function, we are passing it within our list form. So that way our list form is going to be using it. So that is one thing that you should check for, especially if you have this error, is that are we passing in the right thing? So is this add list? Is this add list? And it is. The other thing is that make sure that everything is all spelled correctly, everything is cased correctly as well. And you need to pass in the information from one component to another through prompts. So that's what this is doing here, is that when we are displaying the form, I am passing in the add list function to my form. So that's what this is doing. The other thing that we are missing, and that will also cause this error, is that inside of our form, we need to pull in that information within our props here. So here we need to pull in our props. So pull in our props. And what we are passing in as props here is the add list function. Because again, you know where that is, because here we're passing in add list. That means that we have add list here as well. So then that will go ahead and be defined, and then you won't get that error anymore. Because it knows that you are passing it through props, so it knows that you are grabbing it from the props here. And then from the props, you are grabbing it from the list component, and then this add list function here. The last thing that we need to do is that this will go ahead and clear out the form. And we just need to set the state to the initial values that we have. So set the state to initial value. So how to do that is that we'll just go ahead and do a set list, and then I usually just copy what I have inside of my state, and that's the initial values that we have here. So this will go ahead and add it, and then it'll clear out the form. If I didn't have this, it will just leave the same input of what I have still within the form itself. So I actually want to clear it out when I am submitting the form. So let's go ahead and test this out. I am going to say groceries, and we'll see if there's errors. And if there are, we'll take a look at that. And then here, we'll also go ahead and do get food. So let me see if that works. I'll check my server. And it looks like that did do a insert command. So that will go ahead and go into your routes. It'll go into your controller, run all that logic within the model and the controller. And then it will go ahead and go into your database and create that within SQL. So this will go ahead and have up and running. The other thing is that if you need to have certain validations in the front end, this is where you would do that here. So the first validation is required. So that one is pretty unique there. Other ones are a little bit harder to validate. Like let's say that you are doing uniqueness of or anything like that. That'll be better for us to go ahead and give them an error instead of having to search through our database and having that go through at that point. So later on, when we are going to talk about error handling, this is where we'll be putting in that logic for what happens if they didn't fill out the form correctly, or there is already that title that we have unique. So I'm going to put that here as well of more validations coming. More front end validations coming. You can also go ahead and make sure that certain fields are certain data types. So for example, we have like age, you can go ahead and do lists dot, you can go ahead and set lists of list.age of all the ones that were already there, but then the age would be parse int. So that will go ahead and convert whatever they have as best as possible to an integer of whatever that was stored there. So it would be list.age. So that might be something that you might do as well, is that if it is a certain data type, you have to make sure that that data type is all going throughout your whole entire form. So that would be what you would do for parse int. Parse float is the same. By default, it's a string, so you don't need to verify if it's a string or a text. That's totally fine. Booleans, you can check whether it is true or false. That one is like if else statement. So you can do if list.friend is true or list.friend is false, then go ahead and do it, else go ahead and generate an error. So that's a little bit more front-end validation, but the main front-end validation is what we'll be having as an error message, especially when they submit the form, it will go ahead and tell them the other validations are mostly coming from the model. So these are the small ones that we can do in the front end. Those are really manageable of what we can do, especially with data types. And then the last thing that we can do is probably the required field here. So here is the form. It is working, and you can verify that within your server. And the other place that you can verify is within your components. You will see inside of the list component that it is created inside of there as a new list. So if you go to this, type in list, and then inside of your state, it should be the very last one. That's the one that you should be typed here. So there's my grocery. So what we are doing tomorrow, I'm sorry I went a little bit over time, is that we are going to finish out the CRUD actions. And again, we're going to go a little bit more in depth of what each of them will do. And then we'll finish off the index, show, update, and delete. And that's what we'll do. And then after that, we'll do it all again, but with the next model. Sweet. So before you leave, let's make sure that we have everything in GitHub. After that, I'll let you all go because I kept you 7 to 8 minutes long already. So let's go ahead and do a get add. And then we'll go ahead and do a get commit -m of we got the create list done. It's just not displaying. So create list is done. And then the last thing that we'll do is get push origin main. Make sure before you do this, you stop your server by doing Control-C within your main directory, or else you'll do it here and it won't work at all. So just Control-C out of both of them, and then that should be good. But yeah, so let's go ahead and come back at this particular project, and we'll continue on. If you want to go ahead and try to follow the patterns from the previous lecture, you're more than welcome to try things out. Tomorrow, I'm just going to go more in depth within them and trying to go through each level at a time as well. But besides that, if you don't have anything else, I will see you all tomorrow. Have a good night, everyone.